If you own a classic vehicle and need a title for your ride and you don't have one, then stay tuned for this episode of Dentside Depot, because I'm going to show you all the different ways that you can get a title here in 2025, including one of the craziest stories you've ever heard of getting a title for this specific truck right here. So stay tuned, let's get into it. I'm going to go over many different title situations with you today, as I have done many classic vehicle titles and have pretty much experienced it all at this point. First thing I want to say is, this video is for entertainment purposes only. I am not a lawyer and I am not providing you with any legal advice of any kind. This is just my personal lived experience of getting titles for classic trucks when difficulties arise. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with the ideal situation first, which is this truck, and then we're going to work our way up to one of the craziest title situations that you will ever come across, and how I eventually did get a title for that particular vehicle. Now, the most desirable title situation is you and the buyer are in person with each other. The buyer has a good title on the truck. You go to a local tag place with your driver's licenses, and you transfer the title over to you. That's exactly what I did with this truck. Obviously, you do all the paperwork and you got your title, you got your pink slip on the truck, and everything's good, and the state sends you a title. That's always the most ideal way to do it, but in the real world, that's not how it always works. So that brings us to the next way to get a title. Okay, so the next situation is you have an out-of-state title for a truck, and there's a few different things that can happen. Now, this particular truck that I purchased here, I actually had two titles on this one for the frame and one for the body, because I actually had bought two trucks, and the body on this truck is from a two-wheel drive truck, but I still wanted the title on that truck. And it came from North Carolina. Now, I live in the state of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has special rules for out-of-state titles, and it just so happens that North Carolina is a title state that you have to get the title notarized. You can't just go into a tag place in PA with an unnotarized title for a North Carolina truck, and that applies for certain states, not all of them. So unfortunately, I didn't know that. I'd driven all the way down to North Carolina and picked this truck up. The title was signed, everything was good, but I couldn't get the title. So in that particular situation, fortunately, the gentleman that sold me the truck was very kind, and I mailed the title back to him. He got it notarized and then sent it back, and we still actually talk to this day, because I really wanted the title on this particular truck. Now, of course, the frame is gone, so the title's basically useless to me at this point. But regardless, that's how you're going to get a title for an out-of-state truck. This truck was the more ideal out-of-state scenario, where it came from Oregon, which was a state that you can get a title from without it being notarized. So I was able to just simply take this title into a tag place and just simply get it changed over. It wasn't a big deal. So that was pretty simple. The only thing to note is, in some states, they're going to require you to take a picture of your gross vehicle weight rating when you go and get the tag or the title done. And without that, they may not do it. It just depends on your state. For Pennsylvania, on an older truck like this, you have to have a picture of that particular placard on the truck in order for them to process the tag. Okay, and now we're going to get into the more crazy scenarios, and I'm going to have about 3 or 4 of them for you on this truck, the Dearborn Outback, and I have one other thing I want to talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about is, you're probably watching this video and saying, oh, well, I can just get my classic vehicle registered in Vermont, and they'll send me the registration, and I can take that to my local DMV and our tag place and get the title done. Well, unfortunately, that no longer works. So as of, I think it was June 2023, that rule is now done. You can no longer, as an out-of-state resident in the 49 other states, you can no longer send your vehicle information to Vermont, get a registration with a Vermont registration. It's no longer allowed. You have to be a resident of Vermont, to my understanding, in order to do the Vermont hack. And I believe Maine also has a similar system going on, but certain states will not accept the Maine registration. I believe PA falls under the Maine registration as not acceptable. So I'm not positive on that piece of it, but obviously each state is going to have their own laws. But regardless, the Vermont hack is now gone. So now let's get into trucks with no title at all. And I have 3 situations for you. First one is this truck right here. Now, before we talk about it, I will say this. Unless the truck is really rare and desirable, or the car, whatever it may be, you may want to just walk away from purchasing the vehicle at that point. So if you have a vehicle that's not super rare, then it really may not be worth your time, and you're gonna walk away from it. What I buy here is I always buy rare trucks, so the title is gonna be important to me, and that's why I'm talking about this truck next, because it's a super rare 4x4 crew cab. It's separated from the frame. The frame's in the backyard right now. But when I went to make a purchase on this truck, not only was it in Montana, but it did not have a title. So here's where things get a little crazy. Certain states in the US have a bonding process for titles on trucks where the title is lost. The state of Montana does bonded titles where you basically pay for a bond on the truck, and after a certain amount of time, if the bond isn't claimed or no one steps forward as owning the truck, then you're clear, you're good, the truck is yours. Now, where things get even crazier is, depending on what state that you're in, you can take an out-of-state bonded title and turn it into a good title in your state, and it's completely legit. There's nothing shady about it. It's an absolutely legitimate way to get a title for a vehicle, and that's something that you can definitely do. Now, what we did on this truck was, before I purchased it and before it got shipped out here to Pennsylvania, the gentleman that owned it got the bonded title on the truck. I told him I was going to buy it. I wanted the bonded title first. He paid for the bonded title, and then once he got the bonded title, sold me the truck, and I got it shipped out here. Took the bonded title to my local tag place, no problem. They processed it right away, and now I have a clean and clear PA title on this truck, and it was totally legit. I just paid the taxes that were due on the purchase price. That's it. I have a totally clear and good title on this truck, and there was nothing shady or illegal about it. It's just, you have to understand how the states work, your state in comparison to another state where you're buying the vehicle. And in this situation, I was able to make it work. But if I got this truck without a title from Montana, there's basically no chance that I would have been able to get a title on this one. And that brings us to the next truck that I had some major title issues on, and that is this one right here. But before we talk about it, depending on the state that you live in, some classic vehicles will not even get titles in those states. So if you live in a state like, I believe, Georgia, you don't need a title for the truck. They're just going to give you a registration and that's it. And if you go to sell the truck, the registration then acts as the title for whoever is buying it. So really, a lot of this comes down to the state that you live in, and you really need to understand your state's own laws. Here in Pennsylvania, it's a commonwealth, and things become difficult, and they get tied up in court when you're talking about vehicles. So this particular truck is another really rare crew cab, like the bonded title I got from Montana. Same thing, same exact truck, but this truck came from Pennsylvania, about an hour from my house, and didn't have a title. So this truck, I had to go through the Pennsylvania courts in order to get a title for it. And yes, I actually sued my own truck to get a title for this particular vehicle. So here's what happened. I purchased the vehicle from a gentleman that didn't have a title for it, but it was a legitimate purchase, and it was not a stolen vehicle or anything like that. It was just a legitimately lost title on a vehicle. So the way I had to obtain a title for this vehicle was, first, I had to get a DMV record of the truck from the state of Pennsylvania. Once the PA DMV came back and said clean, clear, no criminal history on the truck or anything like that, I then needed to find the original owner information from the DMV as well. Now, what happens is when a truck is not registered for multiple years or over a decade, the state is most likely going to flush the records from that truck, especially if it came before the digital age, which was this truck. It had sat since about 1992. So there were no digital records on the frame or the VIN for this particular truck. There was nothing left. It just sat on a gentleman's property in upstate PA for decades, untouched, with a lost title. So what I then had to do was petition the court for a title. So I outlined all the details of the case. I no longer had the original owner's information. I had my bill of sale. I had my sale price. I had the VIN information, and I had everything that the PA DMV had to offer on the vehicle. You then fill out all the information that's required to send it off to a court proceeding. And then in addition, I had to advertise the truck in the newspaper and in legal journals in Bucks County, for where I live, and the county where the truck came from in Pennsylvania, for I believe it's 4 weeks. So 4 advertisements and 4 legal journals. And once that comes back with no response from anyone, you just give the VIN and a description of the truck. then you can take that information along with your proceedings for the court, and a judge is essentially going to take that document and say, yes, this truck now belongs to you, or no, the information shows that for some other reason your truck is not yours. So you're taking a huge risk when you do something like that, not because you're doing anything shady, but because the court could say, hey, this truck doesn't belong to you and you're screwed, and that's it. When you do something like that, because you might be out of the money that you paid for the truck. So I was fortunate. I did everything the right way through the Pennsylvania court. I was awarded ownership of the truck, so I won the lawsuit against my own truck. So all I then had to do was take the document that the court provided me and approved and go to my local title and tag place with my bill of sale, pay the tax on the truck, and they sent all that information off to the state, and I got it back in 3 weeks. And now the truck has a clean PA title. It belongs to me, and everything was done legitimately. But that took almost a year to complete, and I believe it cost me almost $1,000 in legal journal, newspaper fees, and court fees to do that, which is why I tell you, you do not want to invest your time and money into a vehicle that no one wants, like a 74 Chevy Caprice or something like that. You want to only be doing this for a vehicle that's really rare and valuable, like this classic 4x4 crew cab. So now let's go on to the craziest title story you've ever heard. Okay, and that brings us to a story so crazy that a career tag person who's in the industry for 35 years told me that there was basically no chance I was going to get a title for this truck. And it is the ultra rare 79 Dearborn 4x4. And I'm going to sit in the truck to talk about this because it's windy and cold here today in PA. So I purchased this truck out of Maryland. Now, I was already, at this point when I purchased this truck, I was pretty much a title expert at that point. So I knew when I went and bought this truck, all I needed was the owner's signature to bring this tag back to PA and get it transferred in my name. I was positive. I didn't need anything else, and I was good. Well, unfortunately, I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong was because when the gentleman paid this truck off in 1981, he never went through the trouble of getting the title updated with the bank note being satisfied. So the problem with that is Maryland has a special stipulation on their titles where they brand them as having a lien. And if you have a lien title and you take it to a DMV in Maryland or any other state, including Pennsylvania, you're not going to get that title issued on that vehicle. The reason for it is, obviously, the state is assuming that someone else has a lien interest in that particular vehicle. So they're not going to issue a title, and that's the issue that I ran into. So I had no idea what to do. I was obviously not going to hire a lawyer because that's crazy expensive. So I used good old Chat GPT, and I figured out that you can actually petition the company, the bank security that had a bank security interest in the vehicle. So I put together a note saying that I had this vehicle in my possession. The owner had sold it to me. This was the purchase price. Here is the original. I even had the original bank note on it, the security note. I sent them all this information via certified mail in a packet with everything in it. Now, when I went and got this tag or this title for this truck, the guy that I always do my titles with has been doing this for longer than I've been alive, and he told me there's no way or basically no chance I was going to get a title on this truck. So I told him, I'm going to try. So I did. What I did was I sent all that information off. So the company never responded to me, and I sent it to their headquarters building. They never gave me a response. Once those 30 days had passed, I took that same packet of information back to the tag place, and I handed them the packet of information along with a notarized affidavit stating that I had done my due diligence to contact that company via phone and via certified mail, and never received a response, and that therefore they're essentially forfeiting any security interest that they had in the vehicle. Now, the loan was already paid off. It was paid off in 1981. It was clear and obvious, so it's more of just a clerical thing at that point, but you still have to have some sort of documentation showing that the security interest is cleared. So I wrote the whole story up in a signed affidavit, sent that off with the same packet that I sent the bank. And lo and behold, in about 3 weeks, the state of Pennsylvania approved it. Clear, no problem. I paid the taxes that I owed on the truck at the same time. And then boom, I had my title for my truck. And again, that was a completely clear and legitimate way to do it. There wasn't any secrets. And now I have a clean and clear title on this truck as well, and it actually took less time than the one going through the court was. So really the moral of the story here today is you definitely want to do your due diligence on the title of the vehicle that you are buying, because if you make a mistake on the day that you go and purchase a classic vehicle, you may find yourself in a situation where you're not going to either be able to get a title for that vehicle, or you're going to have to go through a lot of headache like I've gone through with many vehicles throughout my time doing this. Now, the other thing you want to consider is that vehicle worth the headache? Well, in my case, I only buy vehicles that are in fact worth the headache, like this rare crew cab right here. You're looking at purchasing a vehicle that you think is not going to be worth the headache, you are definitely better off just quitting right there and walking away. It is definitely not worth the time and effort for a vehicle that doesn't warrant going through the time and effort to get a title for that particular vehicle. So I hope this information was entertaining and helpful to you. Remember, this is not legal advice, and I am not saying that what I told you is absolutely correct. This was just my lived experience of everything that I did to do the best I could to legitimately get titles on vehicles that I legitimately owned, and making sure that everything was done correctly. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dentside Depot. Maybe it helps you out a little bit. Remember to like and subscribe and keep restoring those classic trucks.